Welcome to Optily Radio, your regular 30-minute dose of everything you need to accelerate your e-commerce marketing success.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Optily Radio. With me, your host, Nina White. I'm happy to introduce you to today's guest, Ciarán Harris, the co-founder of Each&Other, a Dublin-based award-winning global UX design consultancy. Ciarán is an award-winning principal UX designer, a seasoned technology leader, product strategist, and team creator who has pioneered early technologies for mobile picture messaging, mobile gamification, and commercial IoT products. Welcome to the show, Ciarán.
Thanks, Nina. Delighted to be here.
Awesome. So why don't we get started by going into a bit about your background, how it is you got into the world of UX design and how Each&Other came about?
Okay, so how I became a UX designer completely accidentally, to be honest. I started off in university doing engineering, computer and electronic engineering. Favorite modules were always around human-computer interaction and so on. They were the ones I didn't find insanely boring. Went on to do sound engineering because I did a music technology. I had a lot of passion for audio. It was always a thing that floated my boat, audio, and how little people paid attention to audio in all the media that we have. So I was always really interested in that side of things. Worked in a sound studio in Dublin, working on post-production films, and it was all great. And then I was all set to move over to California. Went over for a lot of interviews. And I got interviewed by, Francis Ford Coppola studio and Skywalker Sound out there in just across the bay in San Francisco. And really great opportunities. But again and again, there were these technology companies kept saying, why not work for us? Why not work in interface or front-end development? And I was like, front-end development, But then I got word of a job in Nokia Research Center. Back when Nokia were a thing. Do you remember that? A long time ago.
Oh, the indestructible phones, definitely.
Yeah. Good old green and black screens. But it was a job to do with multimedia research. And I thought, something I could do. So I applied. The position was in Tampere in Finland. So they flew me over for an interview and they liked me and I liked them, and I moved over a couple of months later. So I spent 7 years there working with the Nokia Research Center, working on some really cool things, like way ahead of and stuff that never came to market, right? We were working on augmented reality concepts back in 2001. Mad stuff.
That's way ahead of the curve.
Mobile multi-platform gaming back in 2002. That never made it to the Nokia handsets, but it was a very exciting time working in a research center, getting to do lots of just insane projects with lots of different partners. And it was through that I actually started doing UX design. I didn't know what it was called back then, but that's how I started becoming a UX designer. And it wasn't until I came back to Dublin in 2008 that I applied for a job, reading through the role, and I was like, yeah, I do that. I do that. Going down through the list, tick, tick, tick. And it was like UX designer. I'm like, okay, I'm a UX designer. So I applied for that team, and it's a team that I'm with now. But so we formed Each&Other 7 years ago. We've had a roller coaster of a time, but it's been a few downs and lots of ups, and it's been a really exciting ride so far.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's a really interesting story of how you got to where you are now. Cool. So let's start with some kind of big picture ideas about UX. So when you think about a new brand, where do you see the user experience starting and ending?
Really, I think it starts at every single point the brand touches off a person's life. And I don't see it ending. Only when the brand goes does it end. A lot of people think of UX as user interface design and just the pixels that are on a various screen, whether it's it's your desktop or your mobile phone. I genuinely see user experience as everything, every interaction you have with that brand the brand systems, the people in the brand, etc. And of course, it strays into all the other areas. It strays into customer service and the whole CX side of things. It strays into service design. It even strays into, some of the legal and compliance issues that those entities have to deal with, whether it's what they can or can't do from a financial side of things and how that plays out in terms of experience. But everything that they do reflects on the end user's experience with that brand.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely agree. Kind of every aspect of brand can affect, users' opinion of that brand, be it a really small, insignificant thing to one person, but it could be a big deal breaker for another. But yeah, definitely a great answer there. So what would you say are some of the common milestones of UX that feature in most digital experiences?
Well, common or good, okay? Because they're two very different things. So,
let's go with good.
Yeah, so good milestones, somebody's first impressions with the brand are memorable. Maybe not pleasurable, but at the very least, they should be somehow rewarding. They should leave you with a good feeling in your heart about that interaction, whatever it may be, whether it's meeting an employee or whether it's seeing an ad for the first time for a brand that you've never seen before, whether that's an online ad or whether that's a billboard or an ad on the side of a bus. Your first interaction should be memorable in a positive way. So that's from the very start. I think as you get deeper into your interactions with the brand, even your negative interactions, and there will be negative interactions in almost every end-to-end experience, is bound to be one point that's not positive. So even those negative interactions, they should have some thought and consideration put into them to make them as positive as they can be for a negative interaction. And I think these are marks of a brand that takes their customers and their customers' experience seriously. So that even if something does go wrong or something isn't what the user or the customer wants, that they're able to save the situation somehow. So they're the kind of milestones. And of course, throughout the various phases, so let's say if it's e-commerce, you're first landing on their store, you should really feel good about where you are, full of trust, full of confidence. You should not have any open questions. An awful lot of purchases are abandoned because of just uncertainty and too many questions. All the way through to purchase, no barriers to purchasing, put things in front of people at the right time to help them along the journey rather than hinder them in the journey. Post-purchase, enough information, but not too much information. Then when you get into the whole returns area, that's a big quagmire for a lot of brands at the moment. Again, there's a lot of good customer experience opportunities on the whole return side of things. Again, to take something that in many cases is extremely frustrating and turn it into something that's easy, simple. And then through to continuing on the interactions, the relationship, encouraging further purchases. Do it in a subtle and a friendly and not pressurizing way. So there are some of the good, I suppose, some good user experience touch points. Common ones tend to be quite different. There are lots of pitfalls a lot of online brands, especially in the e-commerce world, fall for and fall into. And a lot of them, some of them are bigger deals and harder to resolve, and other things are just simply from not spending the time upfront to get those things a little bit right that can make a big difference down the line.
Cool. And I think we'll get into some of those common mistakes and red flags in just a few minutes here. Mm-hmm. Cool. But I definitely really agree with building up trust as kind of a major touch point, both on the site and off the site, with things like reviews and how the companies respond to problems, which, yeah, like you said, there's going to be problems. Not everything is going to flow smoothly. It's just, what is the response? And I think that really says loads about brands that handle that well. So cool. Let's get into your audit process at Each&Other. Like, what is your process for onboarding new clients?
Oh, so I suppose we have such a vast range of clients and project types. Everything ends up being a little bit bespoke, really. We do have our set methodology, but it really depends on what the clients, what the challenge that they've come to us to help them solve is. So if I think more about, like, let's say a typical e-commerce setup, usually it happens when, they know that there's something wrong in a funnel, or they've some pattern that they've spotted, but they can't understand what's behind that pattern, and therefore they can't understand how to address that pattern. We work with a lot of companies on trying to investigate those matters for them. And usually that takes the form of what we call user testing. All that really is just observing people trying to do something on the website. So we normally schedule in one-on-one sessions where we use a piece of software where we can see what somebody's doing on their screen, and we can capture the audio and video. And we have a chat with them about what they're trying to do. We watch them, observe what they're doing, what they're struggling to do. Quite often what they say is not always what they're actually doing. So it's kind of using the trained eye to figure out, well, what is it they're actually doing, not what they're saying they're doing. And by having a small number of user test sessions, you can get to the bottom of a huge range of issues. So just to give you a flavor, Nielsen Norman Group, they have a whole bunch of stats on how many user tests you should do. But to understand any particular problem area, you can catch with about 90% effectiveness, you can catch an area with 5 users. So generally, if we're testing with one cohort of users on one particular aspect of a site or a assist software, etc., we would try to do 6 users of that cohort. If you're talking about different users, different, not so much demographics, but different personas, so different users trying to do different things with your site or service, then we sometimes have more than one cohort, or we might have one main cohort and we might have another 3 or 4 users from a second cohort. But generally, user testing, it's very effective in understanding the qualitative aspects of an issue. And that usually correlates very well with the quantitative data that the client brings to us. So that's always the first step. Then the second step is understanding that, gleaning insights. So something we do at Each&Other is what we call fast feedback. And it's like the day after the test sessions are finished, we can give you a lowdown on exactly what the issues are and how we think they can be addressed. We have a 1.5 hour workshop session with the client. There we can go through them, bang, 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 bang. They're the issues, and here's what we think you can do about them, and here's why they're issues. And that's a format that's not usually common in the UX world. Quite often you wait weeks for a nice tidy report with tens or hundreds of pages. We prefer giving our clients actionable insights as soon as possible. We followed up with the report, usually do, but that just gives some clients the immediate action items that they want to work on. We work with a huge, big search engine. And when we work with them, we quite often find that, we'd have our fast feedback session, and then we'd deliver the report either in person or virtually about 2.5, 3 weeks later. In those 2.5, 3 weeks, they've already actioned a huge number of the insights. They don't wait around, they just get it done. So that's the next step. And then the third step, so we're a research and design agency. So quite often the next step for us is, with lots of clients, is designing the solution to their challenges. And that can be a longer engagement. And quite often that ends up with another piece of user research at the end to validate the design choices and decisions, and just to make sure that it's in as good shape as it can be before they push it live. From a development perspective, that saves heaps of time and money by validating your design decisions before you spend a single development dollar or euro. It saves you a lot of time in the long run.
That's great. Yeah, it definitely seems like you've got a very lean process there, and that it really doesn't take that many users to go through and test a website and make sure it's generally doing what you're trying to make it do. That's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's go back to some kind of red flags, common mistakes, especially on e-commerce websites that you see, and if there are any kind of quick fixes for them, or if they kind of take usually a bit more time and maybe professional development.
Yeah. So for this one, I asked the opinion of my wife, who, much to my chagrin, is a very effective online shopper. She's very good at spending our money on online shops. But with that, she's got heaps of experience. So, quite often she'd be venting about one thing or another on a particular site. But she'll also show me things that really really resonate with her. So we had a big chat recently about this. On the back of the chat, there are some things that I think are very apparent. Okay, so one of the biggest areas where the user experience on a site or an e-commerce store is impacted is where it touches off other systems or off real world interactions. So things I'm talking about, like integrations, some payment gateways or payment providers, you have Apple Pay, things like that. They're great when they work, but quite often people add them, to their Shopify store or whatever it is, and don't fully test them. And when they're added and not fully tested, it can be incredibly frustrating for a customer when they hit, they're there, they want to give you their money, and they're hitting the Apple Pay button and nothing happens. And they're hitting it again and nothing happens. Or worse, they hit it and they double click and nothing happens. Very frustrating. So I think anytime, like if you're using an out-of-the-box system like Shopify or, WooCommerce, whatever, if you're using any integrations or add-ons, be absolutely sure that they're configured correctly and that you've tested them as best you can. Don't just add it and assume it's going to be fine. Test it to bits. Real world interactions are another area. So I'm thinking about, click and collect and the whole returns process. The whole returns process is just fraught with bad user experience. And we might talk a little bit about that later. But overall, in a nutshell, it's make sure your returns process is as good as you can make it. As good as economically makes sense for you, but as good as you can make it. And then there's a whole load of little issues, right? Things like cookie banners. Okay, I know GDPR and EU regulations, they need to be there and they need to be, you can't have the accept button bigger or brighter than all the other buttons. But what drives me nuts is when on the same domain, you'll get that same cookie message several times. You get to the product page, cookie banner. You get to the next cookie banner. You come back a week later, cookie banner. No. Just understand the configuration settings and make sure that if I accept it, that's it for the time frame that I need to accept it. Newsletter pop-ups. I've searched for something on Google. I've landed on your site on a product page or a landing page, and I haven't even had time to digest what's there. And bang, there's a pop-up saying sign up to the newsletter. It's great if you're offering 10% off if you've signed up to a newsletter, but don't do it right when I haven't even decided if I want to buy something or not. Give me a little bit of time to understand what it is I'm looking at. And also similar are chat messages. You just arrive, you've knocked off the cookie banner, you've batted away the 10% sign up pop up, and just as you're about to start suggesting something, in from the bottom right, covering most of your mobile screen, comes the chat window. Hi, I'm a bot that wants to help you stop looking at what you want to look at. Just
so stop annoying your customers.
Stop annoying your customers. Be context sensitive about when you put these interruptions in their path. Because most of these interruptions have good intentions, but it's when they're asked at the wrong time that really drives people nuts. It's like you go into a restaurant, you're seated, and before you've even had a look at the menu, somebody's coming over going, is everything okay with you? Like, okay, that's the wrong time to ask me this. So yeah, it's the virtual equivalent.
Cool. So those are things not to do. What would you say is kind of the class golden standard for UX for an online store?
Well, I think the golden standard has kind of, if you asked me this 10 years ago, it would have been very easy. There would have been a couple of gold standards back then. The really good thing about the democratization of the e-commerce and all the advances is our platforms like Shopify, WooCommerce to a certain extent, but definitely Shopify has made the administration of e-commerce so much easier for ordinary people. Before you'd have to pay a lot of developers a lot of money to get even the most rudimentary e-commerce site up there. So Shopify have done a huge amount for e-commerce, and there's a few competing platforms as well. Likewise, have taken enormous strides from that perspective. One of the challenges is that they have to be very, very broad and quite generic because they cater to so many different business types. Like nearly everything they're doing is basically, here's a bunch of products, you're going to allow your customer to pick one or more and buy them. But the product types can be so different that even with your various themes within Shopify and then your further ability to customize it, it doesn't quite get to golden standard. So there are a few things that you can do on top of your Shopify integration. And there's lots of add-ons that you can, bolt on that help you get there. But I think before even considering what you need to add on, I really think you really need to step into the customer's shoes and be really critical of yourself. Am I doing everything I can to enable this customer? That doesn't take heaps of development time. All that takes is getting a relative or friend over, or even do it online, and just watch them trying to buy something on your site and see where they fall, where they stumble, and what you can do about it. Some of the gold standards, again, a lot of the things that I mentioned already, getting the timing and the context of those right is critical. So for example, if you've decided to purchase something and you've gone to the product page and you really like what you see, but you're indecisive, if you've been a long time on the product page, maybe then it's an opportunity to pop up the chat. Okay, but not a generic chat. Hi, I'm whatever bot. How can I help you? It's like, do you have any questions about this particular product that I could help you with? What extra piece of information are you not getting from this website that I can give you that'll help you, make this sale? So that's one aspect. The 10% off if you sign up for the newsletter. Integrate it into the checkout flow. Make it a feature rather than an annoyance. If you batted away the pop-up, you're wondering, God, do I have to sign up now before I go through the purchase flow? Remove all those concerns and just have it as part of the experience. There are a few other things that can really change the experience that you're offering to people. So let's say pre-purchase, things like in clothing, sizing charts. Okay, they always seem to be an afterthought, and quite often they don't actually reflect what gets sent out in the package in the end. If you can pay attention to the sizing charts, if they differ per product or per brand that you're selling, try to bring that into the product information page, because there's nothing more frustrating than spending ages looking at the sizing chart and figuring out, okay, I think this is going to fit. Everything on the numbers say here it fits, and arrives and it's like a size too small or a size too big, or way off. Excuse me. So paying attention to that, and sometimes that's not helped by the platforms, because they tend to have one place for sizing, and it tends to be kind of an afterthought with the terms and conditions and shipping policy and so on. But really thinking, how can you bring that into the experience of buying the product? Because for buying a clothing product, that's one of the biggest areas of doubt and uncertainty is, will this fit? Couple that with an unclear returns policy, then you're already losing business before you've even got it. So again, be clear about your returns policy, be as generous as you can afford to be, although not so generous that you end up encouraging people to buy 5 items and potentially return 5 items because they don't like them. So I think there's a good balance to be struck there, and it can be a difficult balance to achieve. I was at an event by a business transformation partner of ours over in UK a couple of weeks ago. They were showing how they used AI. It was actually the Manchester Business Academy Data Lab. We're talking at the event, and they used AI to analyze a shipping company's returns, and they were able to pinpoint the exact demographic and the exact areas where the returns were highest. And with that in mind, they were able to kind of head off those issues before they became costly issues. So understanding, if you do have returns, excessive returns, understanding what's leading to these, delving a bit deeper into the numbers and understanding what lies behind, what's the behavior behind the analytics. That's really important. So then moving on, post-purchase, shipping updates. I know it's a good idea to keep the customer informed, but you can be too informed. There's some fulfillment platforms that plug into Shopify and so on, where they give you an update every single time the status changes. So, your order, you've made your order. Yay. Your order has now moved to fulfillment. Yay. Your order has moved from fulfillment to the processing team. Yay! The processing team have dispatched your order. Yay! Okay, you could have 5 emails before it's even shipped. Okay, and then you have another 5 as it goes along its journey. There's no need for that. You're thanks for your order. Your product has shipped, and here's the tracking, and then potentially your product's arriving today or your product's arriving tomorrow, and that's all you need.
Yep.
And then,
So don't spam your customers with unnecessary information. Keep it simple,
for sure.
but enough so that they are informed.
Yeah, and I think that's a fine line between in any service, right? It's a fine line between having a really good service and having something that's annoying, and you need to strike that balance. The only other aspect really then that we've seen growing over COVID in e-commerce world is the whole abandoned cart. Since COVID, there's been a huge amount of people lashing stuff into their carts and not purchasing. And it's a trend, and any of your viewers who have e-commerce stores will be aware of this growing trend on their sites. So I think it's, number one, it's something that it's not fully understood. There's probably a lot of psychology going on there with COVID, and over the years people have gone used to shopping on e-stores instead of window shopping. There could be the whole effects of that left over, that it still makes people aspire to things when they're looking at things they want and they add them to the basket without the intention of purchasing or with the ability to purchase at that time. So don't despair, but there are things that you can do to try and help alleviate that. So definitely things like adding a wish list or watch lists. Definitely, if you do have a watch list functionality, why not put something there on offer? Inform the customer, something you've been looking at is now €5 cheaper this week. See if it works. And then I think one final aspect of good practice in e-commerce is on the any offer emails that you're sending out, or offer communications, or even on site in the purchase journey. Just try to make it real. It's percentages are okay, but if you want to offer something tangible off, maybe offering €10 off is better than offering 15%. It's something a bit more tangible for the customer to relate to.
Yeah, it doesn't make them do the math in their head as they're already trying to check out.
Yeah.
That's all been really, really interesting stuff, but unfortunately we are out of time for today. So I'd like to wrap up with the final question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, if our listeners come away from this episode with just one thing they can start implementing today that will help them accelerate their online business, what is that one thing?
Get a friend or a relative to sit down in front of you and watch them struggle with your site, and figure out all the points where they're having problems and go and fix them. It's not rocket science. It's observation, and it's some tweaks, and you'll be in a lot better position than you were before.
Great. That's great advice. And yeah, definitely, guys, go out there and get someone to test your site who's never seen it before. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Ciarán, for being on the show. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you, Nina. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Optily Radio, Accelerate E-commerce Marketing. We're, of course, brought to you by Optily, the new Shopify app that's revolutionizing how store owners manage their ad spend across Facebook, Instagram, Google, and YouTube. If you're one of the millions who is struggling to know where to spend your marketing dollars for the most impact, try out Optily free for 2 weeks. Watch your returns increase, hours open up in your schedule, and achieve your business goals fast. Learn more at optily.com. We'll catch you back here next time on Optily Radio for more expert tips on growing your online store through marketing. Take care.